All right, so today we're going to go over solving some equations and reviewing that just a little bit. So I'm just going to pick some various ones here that are on your homework and actually just work those out for you. All right, so first off, I'm going to do number 1. And remember, if this negative sign or the minus sign is in front of a parentheses, then we've got to distribute that to everything inside there. And really sort of the key on some of these equations is just remembering if it's a quadratic type equation, if you've got an x squared or an x cubed or something like that, then all those equations have to be equal to 0 before you can factor them and then solve them. If it just has an x in it, then you just want to isolate that x and solve for that. So let's go ahead and distribute that -1, the imaginary 1 that's there. So that makes that 2x minus 1 plus x is equal to 11 minus x. All right, so I'm going to first join like terms. So that gives me 3x minus 1 is equal to 11 minus x. Now I'm just going to work on isolating that term. So that leaves me with 4x on this side. I'm going to go ahead and add 1 to the other is equal to 12. Let's bring that over here. 4x is equal to 12. Divide both sides by 4. So x is 3. All right, like number 2. Remember, if you've got fractions here, you want to multiply through by the common denominator. Well, we have a 5 and we have a 4, so we're going to multiply through by their common denominator would be 20. So remember, this is an entire term here. So we want to multiply this whole term here by 20, and then we want to multiply this side by 20. And so remember that 2/5 times x minus 2, those are just two terms multiplied together. So the 20 and the 5 will actually reduce to a 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. And so that leaves me with 8 times that x minus 2. Now here, these two terms are not multiplied together, so we're actually going to multiply this 20 by each one of these terms. So the 4 in the 20 reduces to a 5, leaving us with 5x. And then 20 times 4 is 80. So we're going to go ahead and multiply through this 8. That leaves me with 8x minus 16 is equal to 5x plus 80. And let's just work on isolating that x. So that leaves me with 3x on this side. I'm going to add 16 and get all my whole numbers on the other side. That leaves me with 96 over there. So 3x is equal to 96. Divide both sides by 3. So x is 32. All right, let's just look at number 3 because it's a quadratic one. And so just remember, anytime you've got an x squared, that means it's quadratic. These have to equal 0 in order to factor. You cannot factor if it doesn't equal to 0. So we're going to take that 10 and move it to this side. We're going to get x squared plus 3x minus 10 is equal to 0. So now we're just thinking, what times what is -10? That adds up to be +3. Well, that is x plus 5. And x minus 2 is equal to 0. In order to solve, remember we said each factor equal to 0. So x plus 5 is equal to 0. X minus 2 is equal to 0. We move those over. And so I'm going to put the answers over here on the side. So x is equal to -5. And then we move the 2 over, and we get x is equal to 2. Okay, there's that. Then let's just look at number 9. It, also remember here that we've got to multiply out any of these binomials in order to start factoring them. So that gives me x squared minus 6x minus 5x plus 30 is equal to x squared plus 3x plus that 7. Okay, so let's simplify this. We've got x squared minus 11x plus 30 is equal to x squared plus 3x plus 7. Well, then we just want to see if we can start moving everything over to one side, or what we might need to do here in order to solve. Well, if I subtract this x squared onto this side, well, that leaves me with 0 x squareds. Okay, so then we know that we might just be solving for x here, but I'll go ahead and write that. That's going to be negative 11x plus 30 then is equal to 3x plus 7, because this makes this 0, this makes this one 0 too. So then let's just isolate these x's. So we've got plus 11x, that leaves us with 14x, and let's move our whole numbers over to this side. That leaves us with 23. Divide both sides by the 14, isolating that x, and you're going to get a pretty fraction, 23 over 14, and that would be your answer. So just, you've got some cubes, you've got some squares. Remember, if you've got the x is brought to some power, you're probably going to have to factor and take that into consideration, that those things need to be equal to 0 before you can factor them. Like number 12, that will need to equal 0 before you start to factor it. So you've got to multiply that out and move everything over to one side. Looks like 14 would also be the same. Let's look at some of these solving an equation for an indicated variable. And just like how you want to isolate, that variable in your other equations, you're also just going to isolate the one variable here. So it's always just the same. Whatever that you're trying to get rid of something on one side, it's always just the opposite function. So here we're going to solve for m. So we want to try to work on isolating this m, which means I'm going to subtract that b from both sides. And remember, you can only join like terms. Well, if they're not the same letter of the alphabet, you can't join them together. So we are just going to have to list everything separately. Now m is times x. We're isolating for m, so we're going to divide both sides by x. So y minus b divided by x is equal to m. So these aren't too bad. Let me do one more for you here. Or let's look at 16, because we've got 5cy minus d is equal to 4d minus cy. So if I add cy to both sides, trying to get those y's together, this is actually a like term because they both have cy's to them. And remember that this one just has that imaginary 1 in front of it. So 5cy plus 1cy gives us 6cy minus d is equal to 4d. Well, then we're going to add the d, trying to start isolating that. Well, 4d plus 1 more d, 6cy is equal to 5d. And now we're isolating that y. And so here, 6 times c times y, well, if it's all multiplied, I can just divide out whatever I don't want over there. So y then would equal 5d over 6c. Let's do one more real quick because this is going to be a little bit different. Let's look at number 19. So first we've got to distribute that a. We're trying to solve for b, and we notice we've got some b's here and we've got some b's here. So let's see what happens when we multiply this out. Well, that gives us 2a plus ab is equal to 6b minus 5. Well, notice that AB and that 6B are two different kind of terms, so we can't join them together. So how in the world are we going to isolate a B? Well, we're going to get all those B's on one side and everything else on the other side. So we're going to add 5 over here, but then we're going to subtract this AB on both sides also. Okay, so that's going to give us 2a plus 5 is equal to 6b minus the ab. Okay, so again, let's just think, if we factor out a b here, then we get 6 minus a. And now we've started getting that b all by itself, so 2a minus 5 on this side. Well, remember that b is multiplied times the 6 minus a, so we can just divide by that 6 minus a. So b is 2a plus 5 over 6 minus a. So that one's a little different, but you can get it.